beat up over here, beat up over there, stabbed, and
wounded in several vital areas, but this group has emerged as the first choice for white inmates in the Department of Corrections who are seeking to join a gang, with thousands of members ready to answer a call to arms.
Honestly, that's really why a lot of prison gangs start. The Spanish gangs and black gangs, if you are not aligned and the white dudes are not unified, they will prey upon you. Welcome back to the W Number. Today I'm going to be reacting to another white prison gang. Let's see what kind of gang would put down a person like Wade Wilson. Because let's be honest, right? A prison gang is very strict when it comes to the type of people they allow into their ranks. Solidarity. They want you to have solidarity for your brothers and be able to rely on you and count on you. Yo, everybody in that gang has a huge ego. They do not want rapists to be in their gang, right? So this dude's now on the news across America. Come to find out there's video coming out about this gang and they've been putting in crazy work. Now, again, I mean, no disrespect by any words that come out of my mouth in the making of this video. Racism is serious down south, especially in the prison system, and the only other gang bigger than this gang or rivaled in violence is the Aryan Brotherhood in that prison system. I'd like to shout out my Lord and Savior. Without him, none of this is possible. Let's get into this, boy.
Criminal organization with bigger hopes and aspirations than your typical gang. They call themselves the Unforgiven, a reference to their outsider status from mainstream society, and they wear it with pride.
As you can see, these dudes are on the streets and in prison.
This group has done more than most all-white gangs to earn its white supremacist label. And within Florida prisons, it is a dominant force, rivaled only by the Universal Aryan Brotherhood. Over the years, the Unforgiven has been linked to beatdowns, extortion, intimidation, and even murders throughout this marshland paradise. And it has also even attempted to gain a foothold in local politics and government. This presentation is...
Damn, that's going pretty deep, especially if you're thinking down south where they're very cliquey in the government, the local governments and towns and stuff like that. Like, they don't let people in very easy. They must have a decent stronghold.
Based on a review of thousands of documents, photos, videos, articles from credible news sources, and the words of Unforgiven members themselves, including a president who claims people have the wrong idea about this group that embraces Nazi symbolism, allegedly tried to take over a Florida town, and which goes by the creed, "Unforgiven forever, forever unforgiven." On the night of June 23rd, 2003, in the small city of Longwood, Florida, two men with totally opposite life trajectories cross paths with tragic consequences. For Tony Francis, it was just another night of work behind the counter of a local quick corner, where he spent as much as 70 hours each week, greeting customers and dishing out snacks. But for 28-year-old Tindell Jason Williams, it was just a night of drug-fueled desperation that had led him there with a borrowed sawed-off shotgun, determined to commit a brazen robbery to pay off a drug debt to his own girlfriend. Williams walked into this and shot.
This is like some real joke shit, man. Like, what the fuck?
Without giving him any time to react. As the clerk lay dying, Williams tried and failed to locate a stash of cash, only to leave completely empty-handed and to dispose of the weapon in Lake Monroe. Earlier in the night, Williams had expressed a specific desire to rob a Middle Eastern man, using a racist epithet in the process. In the end, all he'd managed to do was kill an innocent person and get himself a life case. Surveillance video of the crime was broadcast all over the local news, and for the next 24 hours, Williams and even some of his loved ones fielded calls from concerned friends who easily recognized him. The cops solved the mystery quickly, and even Williams' girlfriend implicated him. Before long, Williams was sentenced to life in prison. As a youth,
That's the dumb shit that people do, man. And then you wake up 40 years later in a prison cell, like, why the fuck did I ever do that? And if people could really see themselves in the future like that, they wouldn't do it.
Williams had joined a so-called gang who called themselves the Sick Boys, but now as a lifer in a place where violence and racial politics rules the day. Williams found a much bigger, more dangerous group to align with. He became a member of the Unforgiven. And in the Sunshine State, this group has emerged as the first choice for white inmates in the Department of Corrections who are seeking to join a gang. With thousands of members ready to answer a call to arms, the Unforgiven has many commonalities with other Aryan-aligned gangs. But it also presents itself as an empowerment organization that is strictly rooted in white supremacy and explicitly seeks to indoctrinate, spread propaganda, and eliminate, quote, race traitors from their own ranks. They've predictably become a major target of law enforcement, not just in Florida, but Washington, D.C., which continues to throw resources towards building RICO cases against them. And while the Unforgiven is well known in the South, it has recently gained nationwide notoriety thanks to its tangential connection to a predatory murderer who gained a cult-like following over his good looks and
there it is,
haunting tattoos. There is a wide spectrum of white supremacist gangs and organizations in the United States, from extremist political groups like the Order to gangs like the original Aryan Brotherhood, which is far less ideological and more centered on drug trafficking and prison control. The Unforgiven borrows from both extremes, but is firmly rooted in a belief that white people face an existential threat from normal mainstream society and therefore need to form a united front to fight back. From its foundation in the late 1980s, the Unforgiven has presented itself as the Fourth Reich, an extension of the belief system institutionalized in Nazi Germany. But the Unforgiven exists a lot like typical prison gangs as well, relying on violence, extortion, contraband trafficking, and unity within its own ranks to survive behind bars.
It's definitely, I think it's something that started behind the wall. It has become so large. Like places out here, like in Worcester, when the hooligans started, you had like, you know, kids from the wicked suburbs, like they're representing hooligans. And there was like, you know, little pockets of them sprouting up all over the place. And same thing with like the C-Dubs and Lowell and the Boyles out here in Charlestown and everything. We're just like, you know, friends.
The Unforgiven's constitution states that inmates in the Florida state prison system were, quote, a minority in the extreme and, quote, exploited, victimized, and preyed upon by those of other races. Their solution was simple.
Honestly, that might be true inside the prison system. It really is true in some situations where I've seen it with my own two eyes inside the prison system. So honestly, that's really why a lot of prison gangs start. And when they say that in that paperwork like that, that is just pointing to those circumstances there, which is when you enter that prison, the Spanish gangs and black gangs, if you are not aligned and the white dudes are not unified, they will prey upon you, take your packages, make you kick it in, things like that. And I've seen this happen. And that's why the hooligans begin in the first place. It makes it almost important and necessary to do these things. But then it just takes its own life.
To form a paramilitary organization in prison, creating a group that has a rigid leadership hierarchy, yet also asserts that all members should be considered equal. How people end up in the Unforgiven varies by the individual. But we were able to acquire a love letter to a woman that was written by one member named Brandon Welch, aka Scumbag, in which he included an autobiography that helped explain his personal journey to joining this prison gang. He wrote, quote, I had a really good childhood. Dad was a major in the Marines. Mom owned a catering biz. Shit fell apart for me when my mom died when I was in college, 06. From there, shit went down the drain, and here I am now. The longer version was that Welch developed a painkiller addiction after studying business in college, and his life totally fell apart. He was prosecuted for being a pot courier, pawning a stolen bike, and finally robbing someone with a hammer. In prison, he was assaulted by the Haitian-American gang known as Zopound and associated with the Unforgiven for protection. As a fully grown adult, he committed a prison stabbing against another Unforgiven member who was wounded in several vital areas but survived, and later told police he would have stabbed Welch first if given the chance. For the stabbing, Welch was given 2 decades in federal prison, a sentence that he has barely begun to serve.
Wow, they gave him 2 decades for that stabbing, which he also told on. I was always told never make a statement, especially after you get in a stabbing, never make a statement. Just saying, right? I refused medical treatment when I got stabbed. I refused medical treatment and everything. Obviously, they didn't get me to the point where I couldn't even make that decision. So, I defended myself and did so pretty well. Man, 20 years for that.
New members are expected to study extremist white supremacist ideology and to undergo a
We've actually done that out here. Like, people have actually done that out here, especially with the younger crowd. The younger white crowd will pass out literature on, Odinism or Wotanism, which is a Nordic religion, which is basically what dudes say is the original and natural religion of the European people, as to keep it more pure and aligned with its own original gods and things like this. European people were super intelligent with the way that they spun those myths.
Probationary period of several months to a year. When deemed acceptable to join the Unforgiven, the prospect must undergo a bloodletting to symbolize the shedding of old blood to join a new family, to accept the following motto, known as the 21 words. Quote, "As brothers forgiven not by society, embrace Aryan culture, knowledge, and strength. Die proud under that swastika shroud, remaining forever unforgiven." The Unforgiven also
That's some heavy shit right there. And
goes by the 21-2-12 numerical code.
I have 21 through 12, bro. Fuck who don't like it. In your mouth when you eat chicken ass, bitch.
Anyway, I'm unforgiving to the motherfucking toe tag, to the bust out. 21-12, you heard me?
Those, all the symbology, the numbers, and those are just ways for other members to identify their legitimacy. Give members a way to remember certain patterns of words and things like that in order to keep their culture alive.
In keeping with this theme, members throw up a 21 hand sign. We've also noticed that from our own review of writings, videotapes, and transcripts of conversations that Unforgiven members often colloquially refer to one another as cracker. Members are prohibited from drug use, and those who do use drugs are supposed to fess up and seek help. The organizational structure is twofold, with a president of prisons and another of the free world.
Honestly, with the no drug thing, I've seen that applied before. Never works with white dudes. Let's say you have the power to enforce that on a real level and the will to go after your own people. Now, that's to say, make real statements out of them and hurt them very badly, kill them even. To enforce the no drug policy, if your members are getting high, it brings down the value of your crew. Just watch it.
In a military-like ranking system that includes lieutenants, soldiers, and sergeants, but also couriers, treasurers, sociologists, and procurement coordinators. Before receiving an organization patch, meaning a tattoo of an iron cross intertwined with a swastika, an Unforgiven member must commit, quote, an extreme act of violence against someone who has committed a crime against the white race, or is a, quote, racial adversary. The tattoo can only be given to a member in a specific area, a vital sign on the upper half of their bodies, to both symbolize their fervent loyalty to the organization, as well as to serve as a reminder of just how painful it would be to have such a tattoo burned off or covered in the event that a member betrays the gang.
Honestly, to keep people in line, the worst punishment in prison is ostracization, is losing the loyalty, losing the love of your friends, especially if you're putting on.
Members are also given a gang pseudonym that they aren't supposed to share with folks outside of the organization.
Not for nothing, it also makes it so that you are committed. It's a show of commitment.
All of this information we've just recounted has come directly from copies of the Unforgiven Constitution and other literature seized during raids of cells, compounds, and members' homes. While these documents claim to have a rigid system of standards for new and established members, the testimony of former members suggests that this isn't always the case. A former Unforgiven member, named James Maypoles, testified in a federal trial that he was required to study teachings of a neo-Nazi philosopher named David Lane, but, quote, I didn't really believe in a lot of that stuff, yet was allowed to join anyway.
I really have read David Lane's Odinism pamphlets before. He makes pamphlets and sends them to all these prisons throughout America, and he's sitting in federal prison somewhere.
During the relevant time periods here, the man in charge of the Unforgiven's prison branch was a lifer named Debo. His real name is John Barker III. And in the early 2000s, he and his brother, John Barker II, were convicted and sentenced for home invasion robbery and murder of a North Fort Myers contractor named Michael Lavolsi, who was beaten, robbed, and hogtied inside of his residence. Debo allegedly attempted to sneak his brother a handcuff key during the sentencing hearing in what police assumed was an escape attempt. Almost all of the members we've researched for this video joined the Unforgiven when they were in jail or prison. And that leads us to the most famous alleged member of the Unforgiven, who may not actually be a member at all.
See, this is what I wanted to find out myself. This is what really interested me, is in what kind of gang would let this dude join, but let's see.
His name is Wade Wilson, and he's everything a true crime-obsessed public could ever hope for. Wilson is a murderer who carried out 2 brutal, premeditated, and sadistic killings within a 24-hour span, later bragging that he lured both women to their deaths through his charm. He has the same name as the comic book character Deadpool, and facial tattoos that many have compared to the Joker. Wilson blamed his crimes on accidental drug ingestion, claiming he must have taken bath salts or synthetic marijuana disguised as cocaine. But if you look at his case, there are pretty clear indications that he is a sadist. Wilson's sad story starts at a Cape Coral nightclub called Buddha, where he met Christine Melton and her best friend, Stephanie Johnson, introducing himself as JR.
I hate this story, bro. I hate this whole fucking shit's trash. Look at this dude. Unforgiven.
Seemed charming and friendly, and eventually the 2 women, Wilson and a man named Jason Shepard, all headed to Shepard's home where Melton and Wilson had consensual sex. What no one knew was that Wilson had left his girlfriend at the club and stolen her car for the 4 to use in the process. The following morning, Wilson sprung into action, offering Melton a ride to get her alone before killing her in her home. While driving home from the scene, he was stopped for directions by a second woman named Diane Ruiz, convinced her to get in his car, then took her to a secluded area and ran her over repeatedly after knocking her unconscious. Wilson called his father for help, who played along with his son's pleas, but actually ended up calling the authorities.
That dude's actually a cool-ass dude, bro. That 23-1 interview was lit.
And helping them arrest him. The crimes have generated a strange fascination, with TikTokers and news media following every small development with great concern. And Jelly Roll's wife even recently revealing that she tried to get Wilson a Netflix show. Wilson has been convicted and sentenced to death. But while his case was pending, news media coast to coast wrote detailed reports about his status as a member of the Unforgiven, claiming that police had confirmed his affiliation with the notorious white supremacist gang. In reality, all of this appears to be based on a single sentence from one police report that was made public after Wilson was implicated in a failed escape attempt from Lee County Jail. The report says that a jailhouse snitch told authorities Wilson and another inmate were planning to break out of jail and to catch a ride to Fort Myers, and that, quote, the 2 are related through affiliation with the Unforgiven. Another indicator is that some of the tattoos Wilson received in jail after his arrest are symbols commonly used by white supremacist prison gangs and those who associate with them. There's some varying
Sometimes in prison, right, dudes get down. They don't reveal how much of a crash dummy they are. But if you're in there for any amount of time, there's no hiding anything. Your whole personality, everything about you is gonna come out over time. So people end up washing out, just going through all kinds of crazy shit in their bed, getting beat up over here, beat up over there, stabbed, and and maybe sometimes even PCing themselves in the hole, like throwing crap at cops. But like when it comes down to it, they could still not be in that gang. Like really, they could have got down for a little bit, beat up and kicked out, and now they're just forever linked to this gang. That could be what happened to Wade Wilson in The Unforgiven.
Possibilities here. One is that the police included this line in a public report because they have other records of Wilson joining The Unforgiven in jail. But in a jail like Lee County, it is likely that all of the white inmates outside of protective custody are affiliated on some level with The Unforgiven, even if the, quote, affiliation simply means that hanging out in the same location at an exercise yard or chow hall. Furthermore, Wilson murdering 2 women, including a white lady with blonde hair, goes directly against what The Unforgiven professes as its core values, even though it wouldn't be the first time that a prison gang turned a blind eye to a red flag and allowed someone with a questionable past to join. In short, it's hard to draw a definitive conclusion as to whether Wilson's really a member, or simply someone who hangs around these guys in a jail setting.
Is now that he has gone back and he's come back to court with his head all clean shaven, he's been on the phone, known to be talking to dudes in there and shit, and like you could tell he's still fucking with guys, and like dudes are still fucking with him on some type of level, unless maybe not, but it seems to me that maybe he still is some type of affiliated. That's my point of view.
Outside of prison, The Unforgiven operates somewhere between a militia and an extremist political club, with members who stockpile weapons, spread propaganda, and sell merchandise as both a form of income and recruitment. In 2019, their president on the outside was a man named Darren Terranova, but a lot of people within The Unforgiven were not happy with his leadership. They viewed Terranova as being too soft and too tolerant of members who strayed from The Unforgiven's code of conduct, and some believed the organization was suffering as a whole. Their solution was to replace Terranova with this guy, Maverick Marr, also known as Saxon. He took over The Unforgiven with a directive to weed out members in bad standing and clean house. Under Marr's tenure, Florida was divided into sectors, allowing...
When he says those in bad standing, means anybody that was questionable, that he didn't like the way they were moving. And especially when you get power shifts inside gangs like this, you never know what they're going to really do at the end of the day, or what alliances will end up forming at the end of the day.
Lieutenants to micromanage their areas more effectively. And he directed members to use the messaging app Marco Polo to send video communications to one another, with the important caveat that they not say anything they wouldn't say to a cop. Unfortunately for The Unforgiven, this caveat was thrown to the wayside by many, and the ATF was able to get its hands on many of these Marco Polo videos, with predictable results. The man seen here is Joshua Fisher, aka Hammer. He was something of a unicorn in The Unforgiven, due to his complete lack of a criminal record in the late 2010s. This made him a particularly valuable member, and prosecutors say this group, quote, sought to have him as a political mouthpiece and invested in his image as a future candidate for public office, including possibly the mayor of Brooksville, Florida. Of course, there was a downside to being a man with a clean record amongst hardened convicts. Many in The Unforgiven believed Fisher had a chip on his shoulder due to him never having gone to prison and would jump at the first chance to be violent. During a Black Lives Matter rally in Hernando County, Fisher allegedly told Unforgiven members to, quote, arm up, and chased protesters with a machete through the streets.
Deputies say he pulled out a machete after trying to start a fight.
In another instance, he was part of a wrecking crew that entered an Unforgiven member's home, sliced his neck for using drugs, smashed his face with the butt of a shotgun, and left after making a wisecrack that the attack was, quote, from your neighborhood white supremacists began.
Thing is, I've seen so many people like that, so many dudes who have not felt the heat of that prison sentence yet, that long stretch, and got out and been like, damn, man, that shit's a headache. You know what I mean? So why look for every reason to go back? No, you're gonna look for every reason to just chill and live your life better. Some dudes who haven't been there yet, they don't know and they don't give a fuck, and they don't care about you. They think that you're soft, like, you know what I mean? Everybody has their own view. Do you, bro? Live your life.
To keep a, quote, book of life, essentially a roster that made it easier to keep track of members in good and bad standing and how to handle them. For many within the Unforgiven, this was the beginning of the end of their membership. Marr formed hit squads to eliminate weak blood, but they showed some compassion. Rather than murdering bad members, they would simply beat them to a pulp, cover their tattoos, and sometimes replace the Unforgiven symbol with the word void and make their excommunication official. Examples of this included a man named Coke Lawson, who was accused of sexually harassing an Unforgiven prospect's wife. He was assaulted, urinated on, and his tattoos were marked out and replaced with scrawlings that
Yo, that's his real pictures, bro. How embarrassing.
made it clear he was no longer a part of the Unforgiven. Unlike many who had received the same fate, though, Lawson's excommunication allegedly came on Marr's orders alone, rather than through the typical protocol, which was to put an excommunication to a vote. Such a vote occurred with another man named Troy Bailey, who was in bad standing for giving his girlfriend an Unforgiven patch when she'd been labeled a police informant.
Whoa.
She also had a baby with a black man. Didn't exactly make Bailey too popular within the Unforgiven. But several ex-members who turned snitch would later tell the ATF that the group planned to not just excommunicate Bailey, but there were some who wanted to kill him. But the ATF dropped the hammer on this group before anything happened to Bailey, charging 15 people to include Marr, Joshua Hammer Fisher, Brandon Scumbag Welch, and other members with nicknames like Stretch, Shrek, and Pretty Boy. As Brandon Welch wrote in the previously mentioned love letter, only 4 of those charged took their case to trial. 8 turned into cooperators, and the remainder accepted guilty pleas and prison sentences that came with it. Those 4 included Maverick Marr, who took the stand in his own defense after listening to several former members testify against him. Marr painted a very different picture of the Unforgiven from what media, the ATF, and federal prosecutors had described. He said the organization had 2,500 members of varying religious, political, and even ethnic backgrounds.
It seems to me like most of these pictures and everything is just like dudes hanging out at house parties and shit. Like, I don't really see in like with guns and stuff, but you can get guns anywhere. I'm sure they're selling meth or whatever it is, but like, this type of shit's gonna happen, man. You're gonna get dudes that have nothing else to do. They have ideologies, they go to prison, and they get these discipline structures, gang structures, and they bring them to the streets, and they think that they can continue doing this with the same power structure out here as in there, but this doesn't work like that. And whenever you get a gang that's so bent on making a name, but you're only making it within your own ranks, it honestly, fellas, like, it's backwards, bro. Think about your plan, like, and really invest in. If you're investing in someone to go into office and make a political image, bro, like when as far as crime, man, fuck crime, bro. Like, everything legit nowadays, brother. Everything legit.
Including members who were mixed race and those who openly rejected a neo-Nazi philosophy, yet were still accepted by the group. Quote, do we have white supremacists? Absolutely. Do we have racists? Absolutely. Do we have people that are very much not either of those things? Yes, absolutely factual. Another thing Marr claimed was that part of his takeover of the Unforgiven included a push to make the group, quote, 100% legal, including an absolute prohibition on robberies, extortion, and drug sales.
See, that's what I'm talking about, man. Maybe something like that, bro. Someone that could really turn it up for a whole crew of dudes that are maybe using drugs, doing the wrong thing, push them in the right direction to like make a real, like, let's figure out how to get us all jobs, make this money, pull it together, invest in something that could really change our lives for real. Like,
As for the assault on Coke Lawson, Marr claimed it was entirely Joshua Fisher's fault, explaining that Fisher was, quote, a very problematic character. Whether the jury believed Marr's testimony is unclear, but they did find him and his 3 co-defendants liable for the various assaults, and a judge sentenced them to lengthy federal prison terms. As for Tindell Williams, the man we started this episode with, he came up in a violent crime investigation in 2011, just 8 years after being sentenced to life. This time, authorities called him a leader of the Unforgiven in Tomoka Correctional Institution, who had organized and helped carry out an attack against a prison snitch. The victim was targeted for telling police about Unforgiven contraband rings in the facility, and his identity was the biggest irony of them all. He was Esteban Quintanal, a man who had murdered Hialeah police officer Pedro Antonio Canas in 1992 during a domestic violence call. Tindell Williams and the other 4 men waited for Quintanal to shower during mealtime. Then, 3 of them pounced on him while the other 2 kept watch. He was rushed to an off-site hospital and barely survived the stabbing. The recent Unforgiven prosecution, while technically a success, has done little to curb the gang's activity. It still maintains a strong presence throughout the state of Florida, with the potential to go even further. As the gang's profile is raised by its connection to Wade Wilson, and as many more members end up in federal prison through the DOJ's ongoing efforts to go after the gang, it is likely that the Unforgiven will continue to spread.
As with any prison gang, they do spread, and sometimes they can become a monster of their own making. You can sometimes create something, as in the case of Suena with the SAC guys, that goes beyond something you could ever imagined, to make something like that into a positive force, right? Like, change the lives of all these kids who have nothing really better going on, and all these drug addicted young white dudes that have no real true ideology that they could really stand on in making progress in today's world. Because let's face it, even just the label of racist can make it so you don't have a voice in society anymore as soon as you have that label. How to be successful in progress and get respect in all the right ways. I appreciate everybody for showing up. Much love, much respect to the Most High. Everybody out there that showed love and respect to this podcast. If you want, you could join this podcast for $2.99 small cents, and you could support something that means something. I appreciate everybody for showing up today. W number out.